Most cybersecurity breaches happen because of something somebody did or didn't do. That's why user and administrator accounts are one of the key technical controls of Cyber Essentials. Section 7 is broken down into two parts. The first is user accounts. That's all about how we control who has access to our systems and what access we give them. The second part is administrator accounts. That's about how we control who has these elevated permissions, how we ensure they are only used to do necessary tasks, and what extra precautions we take to protect those accounts. Today we're looking at how we make sure our staff have the right access they need to do their jobs. And then next time we'll go on to look at how we ensure that people don't carry out high-risk tasks when they have administrative privileges. Under Cyber Essentials, every user must have their own unique account, i.e. you cannot share accounts between users, even if they do the same job, one person per user account. Users must not access the web, email accounts, or do things like invoicing whilst logged in with administrator privileges. These are higher risk tasks, and performing those whilst you've got admin rights is one of the most common ways people get breached. If you open the wrong attachment or visit the wrong website, they can run stuff on your computers without you even realising. Question 1. Do you have a process for creating new users? The first step in controlling who has access to our systems is to have a process for how we first grant someone access. You must ensure you have a process for this and that it's followed each time a new user is added. What we need to understand as assessors is what your process is. Please describe it as simply as possible in the notes box. That process must ensure that someone in a leadership role in your organisation has approved the creation of that user. This step is important to ensure that you have knowledge at a management level of who's got access to your systems and what permissions they've got. I tend to find that this process involves both HR and IT. I'll explain more about that at the end of this section when we look at what my clients tend to do to meet the requirements here. Question 2. Does access to your systems require a unique username and password? What's being asked here is, does everyone have their own unique username and password that is not shared with anyone else? i.e. your staff must not be sharing user login accounts, and every account must have a password. We're talking here about every laptop, desktop and server in your organisation. How do you make sure that happens? It's really common for me to find people sharing user logon accounts. Sometimes it's to save on licensing costs. We covered that in section 6. Sometimes it's for convenience. It's often things like the warehouse. To be clear, it's okay for people to share a computer, but in order to comply with Cyber Essentials, everyone must have their own unique username and password for that computer. When you share logon accounts, you lose accountability. Who did what when? It also starts to breed a culture of sharing accounts and passwords throughout the organisation, and that's not a good thing. Question 3. What do you do when people leave your organisation? When someone leaves, how do you make sure all their accounts have been removed or disabled? It's one of the most common things I find in any business, a long list of users that no longer work there. There are often names on that list that no one even recognises. But the scary thing is when you see those accounts still being logged into today. So how do you ensure that you have disabled access to your systems as soon as people leave the organisation? What process do you have for dealing with leavers? It's not an uncommon story. Just a few months ago, I was listening to one of the police officers involved in a local case. An employee who'd left the company 6 months earlier decided to try and log in to an old server that he had access to. He ended up holding the company to ransom. Yes, he was convicted under the Computer Misuse Act, but not before he caused a whole world of pain for the company involved. Having a robust leavers process helps here. What we're looking for as assessors here is that you've got a clear process for how you ensure staff are removed in a timely manner from your systems. What process do you follow and how do you ensure it happens? Question 4. How do you make sure people only have the access they need for their job? The technical term here is privilege creep. It's when someone has collected more and more permissions as they've moved roles within the organisation. What processes have you got in place to ensure that people only have the privileges they need to do their current job? How do you do this? I most commonly see this implemented with regular reviews of the access people have. Depending on how complex your systems are, This may be as simple as a regular report produced by your IT provider. It lists all the user accounts and the systems and the file shares people have access to. What I'm expecting to see here is some kind of acknowledgement and understanding of how you pick up when people have the wrong privileges and how you put that right. That's part one taken care of. It's quite short, but it covers some key issues. As I said at the start, most cybersecurity breaches are down to people. Let's look at how most of my consultancy clients meet these requirements. I find the starters and leavers process are often very similar when it comes to the IT side of things. We create a new starters checklist. Included in that are the details needed to set someone up on their IT systems. It includes their full name, the systems they need access to, the permissions they need, and who has authorized the creation of the user account. You can then pass that checklist on to your IT provider, who can follow it up to set that new user up for you. Once you've got the starters checklist, it's easy to create a very similar checklist for leavers. Simply a list of all the systems they currently have access to, and use that to request their accounts are all removed. These records then also give you documentation you can review on a periodic basis to make sure that you only give people the permissions they need. You can share that with your IT provider, who can then use that documentation to audit the permissions for you where appropriate. In terms of managing unique user accounts and passwords, if you've got Active Directory or Azure Active Directory, you can use that to centrally administer and audit all user accounts. We tend to pair that with a good IT security policy that all staff have been trained on. Your IT policy should clearly explain what they can and can't do with their IT systems and with their user accounts. This goes a little beyond the scope of Cyber Essentials, but for me, this is about doing things properly. Next up, we've got part two, where we look at how we secure the administrator permissions within our organization. See you then.